Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan, and on behalf of Book Soup, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for our virtual event with JJ French in conversation with Steve Farber, discussing Twisted Business, Lessons from My Life in Rock and Roll. For regular updates on upcoming events, please feel free to subscribe to our email newsletter. This evening's virtual event will end with a Q&A. To submit a question, please use the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen. If you see a question on that list that you'd like for our speakers to answer, please click the like button, and we'll answer as many questions as time will allow. Also, please consider supporting our bookstore and JJ and Steve by purchasing a copy of today's featured book. We have signed copies. Just click on the green purchase button.
What was
directly, directly below the viewer screen. The link will redirect to our website where you can continue your checkout process. And now a few words about our featured guests. JJ French founded Twisted Sister, the internationally renowned heavy metal band, nearly 50 years ago. Since then, he has catapulted his career to become one of the most successful managers, producers, and entrepreneurs in the music business. French has amassed 39 gold and platinum albums as a musician, manager, producer, and executive producer, and has performed over 9,000 shows in 40 countries, selling 20 million records around the world. A charter member of the Long Island Music Hall of Fame and co-star of the critically acclaimed documentary, We Are Twisted Fucking Sister, he is considered a leading expert on vintage guitars and high-end music equipment. French is a rock star, but also shines as a business leader who developed Twisted Sister into a global brand with multiple revenue streams and built it into the most licensed heavy metal band in history. He is a contributing editor and columnist for Copper and Goldmine magazine and writes a business column for Inc.com called The French Connection. JJ's insight and tried and true tips about resiliency, reinvention, tenacity, turning roadblocks into pathways, authentic leadership, and innovation are now available to everyone in his bizoir, Twisted Business. I love that, bizoir. He's in conversation tonight with his co-author. Steve Farber is a Wall Street Journal bestselling author and founder and CEO of the Extreme Leadership Institute, ranked on Inc.'s list of the top 50 leadership and management experts in the world, and #1 on Huffington Post's 12 business speakers to see. Farber is considered to be one of the world's top motivational speakers and leadership experts. His third book, Greater Than Yourself, The Ultimate Lesson of True Leadership, was a Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller. His second book, The Radical Edge, Stoke Your Business, Amp Your Life, and Change the World, was hailed as a playbook for harnessing power and the human spirit. And his first book, The Radical Leap, A Personal Lesson in Extreme Leadership, received Fast Company magazine's Reader's Choice Award and was named one of the 100 best business books of all time. Farber's most recent book, Love is Just Damn Good Business, has been listed by Book Authority as one of the top business strategy books of 2020. And without further ado, I'm going to turn the cameras over to JJ and Steve. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the presentation.
Thank you, Dan. And that's JJ. I'm Steve. And thank you all for joining us. Twisted Business. What's the subtitle? Lessons from My Life in Rock and Roll. So when I'm saying that title, it's Twisted Business, Lessons from his life in rock and roll. So our journey together has been wonderful. We're here tonight to talk a little bit about what those lessons are. They're lessons, actually, funnily enough, that I think are for all of us, because JJ, as you just heard in that rather modest bio, is not just a rock star, but really quite the business guy. And I have a passion for great leadership and a passion for great business. So when the two of us met 12 or so years ago, it started us on a path of looking at how we could possibly work together, and that led us ultimately to this book. And we'll tell you more about that as time goes on this evening. We'll be happy to take your questions, comments, concerns, and emotional outbursts anytime along the way, but we'll carve out some time at the end. But I'd love for you to hear from JJ. You know, the thing about JJ French is not only has he had an incredible experience in his life thus far, he has a phenomenal memory of every freaking detail of his experience from his life thus far. So with JJ, really all I got to do is press play, and amazing things come out of his mouth. So JJ, so
Hey.
nice to see you virtually. We were together in LA yesterday and in New York last week doing a couple of book signings. It's really been a blast. I'm really excited that this book is out. And what I'm really excited about is that people are going to get a chance to hear your amazing story. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, thank you. I'll add to the resume a couple of things. I also ran 2 New York marathons, and the reason why I ran them is that things weren't happening enough with Twisted, and I felt I needed even more challenging role. And so I actually trained while the band was playing in the bars. You can imagine how crazy that is, because you're doing shows during the night and you're running during the day. And I, in fact, only did the marathon as a bet from a club owner. I was reading a running magazine, and he said, "Do you run?" And I said, I haven't really started to run. He goes, "Well, if you run a marathon, I'll give you $100. That's what he said. That's exactly what he said to me. So I said, "If I run a marathon," he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "If you run it under 4 hours." I'd never run anything. So I went, "Okay, I'll take you up on that bet." And that was in 1980. And I didn't make the cut at the Roadrunners Club. You had to get your membership paperwork in time, and I blew the 1980. So I set my sights on 1981, and I drew a map of how many weeks it would take to train if you've never run, and it was like 16 weeks. And so I started like a month before that, running a couple miles a day, and then eventually I'm looking at this grid, and it says, okay, in the first week, you run 2 miles on one day, 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, it was manageable, 7 miles in the week. And the next week you ran a cumulative amount of 10 miles. And remember, we're playing 5 nights a week while this is happening. I noticed as the grid went on that by week 15, if I actually followed this curve, I would be doing a 15-mile training run and then going to do a 2-hour show. And that was 10 weeks down the line. But let's be fair about this. I was 35 years younger, or 40 years younger, actually, and probably 40 pounds lighter. And so I took the challenge, and I followed the grid. And I actually ran the marathon in 3 hours and 50 minutes approximately. And it was a great experience doing it, because I really was getting so frustrated about the band's lack of momentum, which is outlined in the book as we take you through a year-by-year history of it. But, doing the marathon was incredible. It said something to me about my motivation, about wanting to continue to push myself on and on and on. I eventually did another marathon and kind of enjoyed it. Also, I raised money with the Pink Burst Project, which he never really discussed in the book, which was a project close to my heart. My daughter has uveitis, which is an eye disease, and in order to call attention to this very rare eye disease, which is like arthritis of the eyes, it's uveitis. It has nothing to do with UV rays. It has to do with the uveal lens in your eye. I did something that no one has ever done before and probably will never do again, which is I got 25 guitar and amplifier manufacturers to make custom amps and guitars that all were color matched and design matched to my specifications. And I auctioned it all off to raise money. And I'm also proud of it. So, but this will also link into the love is just damn good business part of Steve Farber, and why we really get along so well, because what Steve really does is Steve teaches the benefits of positive workplace environments and really caring about the people that you're with. And in the first stages of Twisted Sister, we were just a bunch of narcissistic guys who didn't really care about anybody else except ourselves. And the later iteration of the band, we completely changed horses. And that's why Steve and I kind of we meet on these terms, because I never looked at the band necessarily as a business model until I looked at it as a business model. When we were going through all the crap that started in nearly 50 years ago, we were just a band. I was just a guitar player in a band. If somebody had told me 50 years ago the band was going to last 50 years, I would have said that's absurd. In fact, 4 bands formed the year we formed. Kiss, 4 famous bands that you know of: Kiss, Judas Priest, AC/DC, Twisted Sister. I think if you asked any of us in 1973 how long we were going to last, the answer would be 5 years. That was the standard answer, maybe 10 at the outside. So the fact that we've all lasted, and not only lasted, but had an incredible impact on the culture of music and the longevity and the meaningfulness of it, especially because We're Not Going to Take It, and I Want to Rock are so famous, and We're Not Going to Take It is the biggest worldwide anthem in the history of rock and the most licensed heavy metal song in the history of rock. It's an incredible legacy to have, and I didn't know that legacy was going to happen. So it was a growth legacy.
I want to ask you a question that I've never asked you before. In all of our hours and hours and months and years, frankly, of conversation. When you first heard the first iteration from Dee Snider of We're Not Going to Take It, when I mean, I don't know what your process was. Did he say, hey, I got, I'm playing around with this, here's an idea, or did he bring you the song fully formed? In whatever form you first heard it and you guys first played it, was there any part of you that said this song is one for the ages?
No, not at all. In fact, if you go back to the way Dee started writing, his first, Dee was an Alice Cooper fan. And if you're an Alice Cooper fan, Alice Cooper writes anthems. No More Mr. Nice Guy, 18, Billion Dollar Babies. He was a big anthem guy, as was Slade. Slade was an anthem metal band. And Dee loved, also Sweet, Fox on the Run. These are anthem-like songs. So when Dee started writing, one of his first anthems was a song called I'll Never Grow Up Now. That is really the basis of the side of Dee that writes these anthems. So many years before We're Not Going to Take It, it was 1979 to be exact, Dee wrote, actually 1978, he wrote I'll Never Grow Up Now. We released a single with it, I'll Never Grow Up Now. And that was the first inkling that he could write anthems. And then the second big song he wrote was called Bad Boys of Rock and Roll. And that was yet another anthem. And both, I'll Never Grow Up did not make the original first album in the UK, but it made it in America. They rejiggered the song listing. Bad Boys of Rock and Roll also made that first album. When we made the second album on Atlantic Records, we had a huge hit in Europe that never made it in America. But again, it was an anthem. And it went top 10 in England. It's called I Am, I Me, which is one of my favorite songs. It's actually above We're Not Going to Take It in my choice of playing songs live, and we don't play it that often except when we're in Europe. It was a massive hit. We got on the television shows all over the place. We got on the cover of magazines, much to the chagrin of the American label. It didn't really care about us at all. It did nothing to promote that record. We had a hit record. So when he wrote I Am, I Me, which was the last song he wrote for Can't Stop Rock and Roll, and he wrote it because the record company president said, you guys need a hit. I mean, it was one of those kinds of discussions, Steve. Can you give me a hit? Like, Can't Stop Rock and Roll is a great song.
People ask me that all the time.
That's like an anthem. Can't Stop Rock and Roll, that's good. But no, we need a bigger song than that. We need a bigger one than that. And Dee kind of said, well, I got a song called I Am, I Me. 2 chords, exactly 2 chords. And we did it on the spot and recorded it in 2 days. And that became a giant hit. And then, of course, You Can't Stop Rock and Roll was the follow-up single, name of the album. It's another big anthem. So when he came to the Stay Hungry sessions in 1983, at the end of 83, when we were shopping around for producers, he threw out 20 songs, 30 songs. And We're Not Going to Take It as one of them. I Want to Rock is one of them. It's just a whole bunch of songs. And we demoed all these songs and we sent them out to producers. And not one person said any song was better than another song. In fact, to make it even more of an insult, the producer that we got to do the record, he didn't like the songs at all. And he wanted us to do 6 Saxon covers, which Saxon's a heavy metal band from England. And by the way, that did not make Dee feel too happy right. That he didn't want 6 of the songs, including, I think, We're Not Going to Take It. He just had no interest in it. And my favorite song on that album, my 2 favorite songs from that album are SMF is and Don't Let Me Down. Those are my 2 favorite songs from Stay Hungry. The 2 songs that I responded to the most emotionally. I loved Don't Let Me Down. I loved Stay Hungry. I mean, all the songs are great, but it didn't occur to us until after the recording of the song that maybe there was something special there. So there's a very long answer to your very short question.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing because, it's that 2020 hindsight, right? It's such an obvious anthem that's been picked up by everybody on the political spectrum, every cause on the planet, and everything to, beer and hemorrhoid commercials. I'm not sure
Yeah,
about the hemorrhoid commercial, but pretty
NPR
close.
had this. NPR had a chart 2 years ago on 4th of July. It was the 30 songs that unite America, right? So I'm watching NPR on the morning of July 4th 2 years ago, and they said these are the top 30 songs that unite America from 30 to number 1, and they start counting down. And on this list is "This Land Is Your Land" by Woody Guthrie, "Born to Run" Bruce Springsteen. A couple of "Blowing in the Wind" Bob Dylan, "We Shall Overcome." Come on, "We Shall Overcome."
Mm-hmm.
Who hasn't sung that thing? And the list keeps going up higher and higher and higher. And of course, I'm not thinking we were anywhere near the list, so I was just being curious as to what songs unite America. And they get to number 3, and it's "We're Not Going to Take It." And the 2 songs above us were a couple of gospel songs that I truly we're not that familiar with, but that's fine. That's fine. We were the number 1. We were number 3. So that only underlines what you're saying, is that the song has worked itself into the fabric of not just America, but it's used in, when the Brexit issue was happening in England, they were singing "We're Not Going to Brexit." In South America, they turned it into a butter commercial called "Huevos con aceite," which means eggs and oil. Don't ask me why, but when we're in Europe and we're saying "We're not going to take it," we sing "Huevos con aceite, huevos con aceite, huevos con aceite y limón," which means eggs and oil with lemon. Don't ask me why. And they make T-shirts with our logo with 2 fried eggs on them. Don't ask me why. But when we got to Spain, we were playing a show with Iron Maiden in Spain, and there's 70,000 people out there, and we decide, let's see if "Huevos con aceite" works here in Spain. And I have a video, 70,000 Spaniards, "Huevos con aceite." So it really has done an amazing job. And of course, "I Wanna Rock" is the second most performed song. The 2 songs, if you think about this, when you think about Queen, who is a phenomenal band, you think "We Will Rock You, We Are the Champions." Those are their gigantic anthems. When you go to stadiums, we will rock you, and "We Are the Champions." These are 2 titanic monster songs, came from the same band on the same record. And here we have 2 titanic monster songs from the same band on the same album a decade later. And we share the spotlight, for example, with Queen and Fleetwood Mac. "Don't Stop Waiting for," that's another gigantic hit. And "Don't Stop Believing" by Journey. These are songs that kind of just outline generations and outline genres. And we're so proud to have those songs do it. But again, Steve, it's funny. Today we were driving around Barham Boulevard. I was coming back from the Adam Carolla show. I'm driving down Barham Boulevard, and I realized I passed the Oakwood Apartments. I went, wow, that's where I lived when we did Stay Hungry. And as we're coming down Barham Boulevard, I said, man, do you know how many years ago we recorded that album? We recorded that album 38 years ago.
Amazing.
In LA at Cherokee Studios on Fairfax, 38 years ago. And here we are 38 years later talking about that song.
Yeah. And it's still being licensed like crazy. So let me use that as a bridge into the business side of this discussion, because I'm noticing from a couple of the questions, and we'll get to some of these questions in more detail later on. But here's Seth says, "I'm a leadership coach and SMF," right? So, which is of course the name of the Twisted fan base,
right?
Or fan club. What do you call it? Fan?
Yeah, it's our fans. Yeah, it's the Twisted fan club.
Right. Leadership coach and SMF.
Yeah.
What does SMF stand for?
You want me to tell you what it stands for?
I think it's important that you.
Well,
SMF
it stands for the sick mother. The SMF of TS stands for the Sick Motherfucking Friends of Twisted Sister.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm a leadership coach and sick.
It's not exactly a religious organization.
Yeah. Okay. So my point is that it would seem to the untrained eye on the street that this is an odd pairing, you and I, in this book. Metal guy, heavy metal guy, and a leadership guy. And as it turns out, it's not odd at all because of your ability, not only your ability as a business person, but your ability to extract the lessons from your experience. And that's one of the things I want to quickly tell the story of how you and I first met, because I think it's important for context. Mm-hmm. We met at a conference called SobCon, which was a business conference focused on social media and online stuff. And this was 12 or so years ago. We were there because Sharon, JJ's girlfriend at the time, now his wife, worked at Forbes.com back then. She was going to be sitting on a panel. He's a curious guy. He said, I'm going to come along and see what it's all about.
I want to support her because she's always supporting me. So I was there to support her.
Right. Okay. So this was your chance to give back a little bit. Yeah.
Sit in the audience.
But honestly, though, you're a business guy too, and you're a curious guy, and you were really fascinated with what the discussion was. And I know this because I was one of the people who was speaking at that conference.
That's totally true.
And that's how we met. So I got up there and did my thing about the radical leap. Love, energy, audacity, proof. Quick 20 minutes on the importance of love in the context of the business. Then I open it up for Q&A. Any questions? And this guy was the first guy to raise his hand. And we had not yet met. You were actually pointed out to me across the room. Somebody said, hey, that guy's from Twisted Sister. And I said, really? And that was it. We hadn't met. So you took the microphone and you said, and I've said this to myself so many times, I now treat it as a quote. It may be more of a paraphrase, but the words, the important words, the significant words are absolutely accurate. You said, I'm in the entertainment business, and that is a business filled with scumbags and assholes. Okay, so that's in the microphone, 120 or so business people in the audience, and that's the way you prefaced the question. And then you said, but I've never believed that I had to be that way in order to succeed in a business filled with those people. And that stuff you were just talking about, Farber, that's the way that I've always run my business. And then, so that was our initial connection. It was that commonality in what appeared to be completely different worlds. So then we sat down at breakfast the next morning, and you told me the whole Twisted story. And what hooked me in from the beginning was you said, Twisted Sister, the band that made it, the band that everybody knows, the band with Dee Snider as the front man, the band that did We're Not Going to Take It and I Want to Rock, was the 11th version of the band. And by that time, we had come to realize, and you in particular had come to realize, that there was no place for drugs and alcohol in the business of rock and roll. And that band that we all know didn't do drugs or alcohol, but you just couldn't tell anybody because it would ruin your reputation. So I was like, holy crap, tell me more. And that's all I had to say. And you told me more and more and more and more. And I said, I told you two things, and correct me if I'm wrong. I told you two things at breakfast that morning. Number one, I said, you've got to get up on stage and you got to speak about this. You got to tell people your story. And number two, you got to write a book. And that was our first conversation that we ever had. And that's the way that I remember it. There was that.
Yeah, I think I also explained that the reason why we cursed a lot was because we were so straight drug wise. We had to appear as crazy as we could, so we cursed a lot to put on the show. So sick motherfucking friends, Twisted Sister, Twisted fucking sister. I mean, everything was fuck this, fuck that. Because when you curse a lot and you look like D, you're presumed to just be out of your mind, and also, Mendoza and D with all that hair, it's like standing in between two chia pets, on stage. So we were professionally crazy, but privately we were business people, and you love that. You actually really love the fact that the portrayal of the business model of the band was to be professionally nuts, but that the basis and the reason why the band succeeds is because the band works really hard and has a basis of a business foundation. And the more, Steve, the more I was exposed to the formality of the business world that Steve occupies, the more I started to really understand that everything that I have developed, every theory I developed, every survival technique I developed was really classic business survival techniques, of which there may have been books written in the past, but there were never books written through the prism of rock and roll. And that if I could somehow give an entertaining analysis of how we survived with these techniques that you've heard before, but you've never heard them this way. You never heard them put this way, and you certainly wouldn't expect to hear it from a heavy metal guitar player who you assume is a monosyllabic idiot. I mean, when you play in a heavy metal band, the interpretation is that saying a 3-syllable word is a major, major accomplishment in my life. And almost to the point where, as a comedian once said, when he heard that Stallone and Schwarzenegger were going to make a movie, and the guy said, well, what's the movie going to be called? Duh. There is general consensus out there that we just must be a bunch of lunkheads and we have nothing going behind it. So in a way, that's kind of cool, because that means the expectations of what I know are so low that anything I say just really has to sound incredibly intelligent and enlightening. But I also knew, because I've been telling these stories for so many years, that if it was put down correctly in the right context, it would be a damn good book. And that is something that has proven to be correct, because we have a damn good book. But the fact that it's now written so you can really read it, you know, like Tavis Smiley said to me, man, you had a crazy life. Like, I had a crazy life. I didn't think it was crazy at the time I was leading that life. But I guess in context, when you read the book and you read before Twisted even started, the 5 years that lead up to Twisted Sister, between the ages of 15 and 20, when I was a druggie and a drug addict and a drug dealer and a high school revolutionary and a musician. And so what am I doing? It's politics, it's rock and roll, it's drug dealing, it's drug taking. Well, you know, obviously I was multitasking at an early age and pretty damn successful in it. But as the book details, I do not glorify the drug use. I do not glorify what happened. I tell you what happened. And then I also tell you I got out of it because it was going to kill me. Because I had come so close to the flames, so close to being arrested, so close to being murdered, so close to dying from ODing on various drugs in amounts that would just kill human beings, that the fact that I was able to stop, people find it to be almost unbelievable. You know, it's pretty unbelievable, but it is true. I really decided on a day, and decided that day will be the last day to do it. And I did stop on that day, which was Easter Sunday, 1972. And that is actually true. I actually did. However, when you're 20 or you're 19, I was 19 and I stopped. What is the next act? Like, so now what? Okay. So now you're straight. Now you're not doing drugs anymore. Now what? And of course the answer is, well, why not just become a transvestite rock musician?
Well,
and there's the transition.
But also, to add on to that, that was your personal decision, and a good one, of course. But you extended that to the rest of the band. So, in other words, you said, anybody that I hire in this band has got to subscribe to the same no drugs, no alcohol.
Yeah. But Steve, as you know, it didn't start right away.
Right.
I joined as a member. I wasn't managing. You know, all I was was a guitar player. In fact, to really, I mean, the truth is, I was hired. I was the last guy hired in the original band that was called Silver Star, that changed its name to Twisted Sister on Valentine's Day, 1973. We were a transvestite rock band, but all the guys were straight, you know, but we knew that chicks like guys who look like girls, and we were going to get laid a lot. That was the promise made to me. Promises made, promises kept. I've heard that quote somewhere recently. The guitar player said promise, and it's true. It was a wonderful thing. It was a glitter band. I used to be chained with dog collars to my lead singer. We used to tongue kiss during the Bowie medley. We used to play David Bowie songs. We would kiss because it drove the girls absolutely crazy. It was a great chick magnet, but that band was full of alcoholics. And I came from a drug world. I didn't drink, and I never liked the taste of alcohol. So I was a bemused bystander watching these other four guys drink themselves night after night into oblivion, thinking, well, maybe that's what you do in a rock band, because up until now I hadn't really been in a working rock band. And as you will see when you read the book, problems started occurring due to drugs and alcohol through version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4. By the time the attrition came down to me and the original bass player, I said, enough is enough is enough. Enough is enough. The next guy I hire is going to not do drugs and alcohol, and that was D.
Right.
Enough is enough is enough. And when Kenny left, the bass player, Kenny was a brilliant bass player, but he was an alcoholic. He was a closet alcoholic. I did not know he drank. Very high performing alcoholic. And when he admitted to me that he was an alcoholic, and we came to terms that you shouldn't be working in a bar if you're an alcoholic. Let's be straight about this. If you want to save your life, this environment is not the environment to be in. He agreed. He left. I replaced him with Mark Mendoza, who hated drugs and alcohol. So all of a sudden, I had a band that looked insane, that was completely straight. And, that allowed us to work 5 days a week, 6 days a week, 4 shows a night, 5 shows a night, at an unbelievable breakneck pace, which the book has all the dates in the back so you can see it. And this is the story that made you, that was so compelling to you.
Yeah. So the model that emerged from this, through lots of back and forth and thinking about it, and kind of dawned on you, JJ, on a walk in Central Park, I believe, is the twisted method, which we outline in the book. It stands for tenacity, wisdom, inspiration, stability, trust, excellence, and discipline. So now it's a nice, convenient acrostic. And, one could say, well, that's a little force fit, right? Because it's twisted. Yeah, maybe, but the principles are really significant. So what you just said, for example, about 9,000 shows, we talk about in the book in the context of excellence. So really what we tried to do was take these incredible stories and use them to illustrate these principles that are important not only in the music business, but in any business and in life in general. And we talked about the principle of the boredom of excellence, which is a realization that you came to, that excellence is really gained from doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. My favorite line, I'm going to steal it from you because I just want to say it, was, you did the same songs over and over and over again. We were the heavy metal version of Cats, except some of us were Jewish, so we spelt it K-A-T-Z. That's one of my favorite lines. So anyway, we captured these in the book, but also we give you the context. So I'm going to do something a little bit. It might seem a little bit odd for you, for a minute, because I want to read you a part of your own story. So for those of you who are on with us this evening, you may be curious, what's the process of the two of us working together on this book? Because this is JJ's story, and I'm a co-author on the book. So how do you figure that?
Hey, Steve.
Yeah, you're muted.
Let me ask you this question.
Yeah, go ahead.
When I asked you to work with the book with me, did you ever hesitate?
Yes.
Okay. What was your hesitation about doing it?
So I had a couple of hesitations. First of all, so I had written, when we first started talking about this, I had written 3 books: The Radical Leap, The Radical Edge, Greater Than Yourself. And those are all on extreme leadership. That's my platform. That's what I teach. That's what I speak about. That's what I consult on. So my first hesitation was, this is not really part of my brand. Okay. My second hesitation, and I don't know if there was any particular order, but just as if not more important, was I don't know what role I would play in it. So I have to bring value to it, and I'd have to do it in a way that you're going to love, because I didn't want to let you down. And I remember one of your concerns too, that we talked about right from the beginning, was, a business venture among friends can end up killing a friendship if it doesn't work out right. So there was a little bit of that hesitation kind of mixed in there for me. But where it kind of came together was, I saw you start and stop a couple of times with other potential co-authors. And so then we got together, and it just kind of seemed that it wasn't going to happen unless I got involved. And then we talked about it. And after we talked it through, it's like, damn, this could be really good. And one of the things that hooked me in is that let's make this a business book, not just a memoir, but what came to be called the term you coined, a bizoir, a business book and a memoir. So now I thought, okay, I can contribute to that. So then my job was to help take all these millions of stories and get it down to the ones that could really illustrate the lessons that we were trying to teach, but also to capture your voice as a writer, using my skill as a writer to take your incredible storytelling ability, your verbal oral ability, and making it work on the page. So it was really quite an adventure. And what I would like to do is, and we haven't done this yet at any of our appearances or book signings or anything, and it's really kind of a traditional thing to do, is to actually read a little bit from the book. So I just want to read a very short passage, and I want to share this one because we start the book. The first part of the book is really your early days, the early days of John Segal, and how did little Johnny Segal become J.J. French, and where did that spark for music come in? And this was one of my favorite stories of yours, when you were a little kid and you were home and you got sick and you just started listening to the radio. And so if you'll indulge me for a second, I'd like to give you guys a little taste of the book. Actually, it's from the very first chapter called How It Began. And so it started out saying, all I wanted to be was a rock star. And it started when I was about 11 years old. He said, to keep me occupied, my mother gave me a transistor radio. One afternoon in 1963, I was listening to WABC, which was the #1 AM radio station in the United States at the time. I didn't really know what a greatest hits countdown was, but they started playing down the latest songs. Number 5, The Night Has a Thousand Eyes by Bobby V with the Johnny Man Singers. Number 4, Up on the Roof by the Drifters. Number 3, Go Away Little Girl by Steve Lawrence. Number 2, Walk Right In by the Rooftop Singers. And the #1 song that week was Hey Paula by Paul and Paula. I'd love to tell you that it was a song by Chuck Berry or Little Richard or James Brown that struck me like a lightning bolt and lit the fire of music in my being, but it wasn't. It was a cheap, stupid pop tune called Hey Paula. But there was something undeniably special about it on that particular day. It was #1. I was so impressed. And I thought, why is it #1? The next week, I started listening for number 20. When they got down to #1, Hey Paula was it again. Same for the following week. I started listening to that radio station every waking minute. They played the same 20 songs all day long. Walk Like a Man, Wild Weekend, Up on the Roof. They played them all over and over. Yet #1, week after week, was Hey Paula. I was fixated on this #1 phenomenon, but I had no idea how it worked. I asked my mom, and she also didn't have a clue. So I came to the obvious conclusion. It was a worldwide vote. It had to be. People around the globe just called the phone number, cast their ballot for the best song. After 4 weeks of Hey Paula holding the top spot, a timeless, universal truth dawned on me. It is the top song in the world, and it will remain that way now and forever. And then on the 5th week, tragedy struck. The weekly countdown obliterated my adolescent rock music paradigm when He's So Fine by the Chiffons took the top spot away from Hey Paula. Who is responsible for this? I cried to my mother. I mean, I literally cried. I don't know if she was bemused, amused, or just thought it was a stupid question. She obviously didn't know the inner workings of the music industry, but she clearly recognized my deep interest and the pain I felt in the moment. I didn't care about school, but this craziness was something I was passionate about. I was on a mission to figure out how to get my beloved Hey Paula back to its rightful place in the top spot. I surmised that it had to involve the number of records people were buying, which may have been the first indication that I was a budding entrepreneur. and that maybe there was something I could do about that. I begged my mother to take me to a record store. She took me up to 107th Street, where there was a tiny little record shop in her best friend's apartment building. I stepped in with amazement. It was a dusty, smoky, cramped place with 45s arranged on wooden shelves. A little old lady with thick horn-rimmed glasses sat behind a shabby wooden desk. The countdown surveys from WABC, WINS, and WMCA were spread out in front of her. I picked them up and read them with wonder. "Do you have Hey Paula?" I asked her. She nodded. "How much is it?" 49 cents, she said. "If I buy it," I asked, "will it go back up to number one?" Now, that crusty little old New York lady could have easily scoffed at me and said, "You are an idiot, kid. It's all run by the mob. It's all about payola, you schmuck. Pay for play." But she didn't. "Maybe, son, maybe," she said. She gave me hope, so I bought the single. And guess what happened? Nothing, of course. I mean, nothing in terms of helping Hey Paula shoot back to number one. But in that moment, my obsession with the charts and the industry behind them exploded.
I'll buy the book.
Is that not a great story? Oh my gosh. So right from that time, it was, you would think, wow, what a great story. It must have been a straight trajectory to the top from there. Not so much.
Yeah, not so much. And, to put this in a little time frame for people, that was February of 63. The Beatles hit in I Want to Hold Your Hand was released on December 31st, 1963, exploded to number one immediately, first week of 64, and then they appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show. Now, it is a cliche, however, it's true. 99% of all musicians of my age will say this in interviews. When I saw the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show, I wanted to be a rock star. That is a statement that has been stated over and over and over again. And I am another one of those guys who will tell you, when I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, I said I want to be a rock star. However, if somebody had put their hand on my shoulder at that very moment and said, "John Segal, you will have a gold record," and I would go, "Oh, like in a couple of years?" No, in 20 years and 6 months from today, I may have said, "Screw that," but I didn't. And in fact, it led to an incredible journey because I didn't know. And sometimes not knowing is the best part of the journey, because you don't know. And it all started from Hey Paula. And today, if I hear Hey Paula, my heart flutters. It is absolutely the benchmark for my interest and my passion in this. And they never had another single again. But that really was it. Steve, I have to tell you, that was so beautifully written. To hear you say it really, it also brought the song back to me. It's a great opening, and it really did lay the groundwork.
Thank you. And that's what I considered my primary role in this book was, like I said, to make it work on the page, because the spoken word and the written word are obvious. I mean, maybe it's not obvious to some folks, but they're very different. And so what that gave me the opportunity to do was to take literally piles of transcripts from our conversations together and pick out the stories that really needed to be in the book, and then literally take it line by line and shape and mold it so it works in that way. Yeah, and I'd never done that before. I mean, I'd never done a project like that before, so I felt a lot of pressure to get it right. And so I'm really gratified to hear that you love how that sounds.
I do. I love it. And, I'm a writer, as you know.
Yeah.
And people said to me, "Well, you're a writer. Why don't you write your own book?" And I believe, again, one of my big things is collaboration. I believe collaboration makes it stronger in every way. Twisted Sister is a perfect example of that. If Dee Snider wasn't the monster singer songwriter that he is, you wouldn't be caring about JJ French. If Mark Mendoza was not the monster bass player, producer he is, you wouldn't know about JJ French. If Eddie Ojeda wasn't as great a guitar player and AJ Pirro wasn't as great a drummer, you wouldn't know about me. So we are a product of collaboration. And I've always been someone who recognizes what I know and what I don't know. And that's why I brought you in to do it. And I know that every day that we're together and every day I go over this, I made the absolute right choice. You're as perfect a partner in this as those guys are to my band. It was really a great choice to make, because now a story that needed to be told is told in the same way that Twisted Sisters records wouldn't have happened unless all of us played on those records and did what we had to do. So, and that then speaks to the formula, the format of the book, which is the business side of it, which is the twisted method of reinvention, which takes those letters and those words connected to those letters, which is tenacity, wisdom, inspiration, stability, trust, excellence, and discipline. They're not hollow words.
No.
They're actually words with stories behind them that explain exactly why. And the reason why I approached it that way is because there was another book written a couple of years ago in which the author decided they picked one word and said, that's the reason people become successful. And it was a best-selling book. This word is why it was successful. And this is the thing that got me crazy. I'm listening to this person do a TV show and they're saying, yeah, this word is the word that is the fundamental word for everybody who's ever been successful. And I literally went for a walk that afternoon and I said, no, man, it is not one word. It may not have to be a book, but it's not one word. And I came home, I started putting words on paper that more exemplified how I thought my life was going in terms of Twisted Sister. And I wrote like stability. There's a reason why. I wrote tenacity. I wrote trust. I wrote discipline. I wrote excellence. I wrote wisdom. I wrote inspiration. And when I moved the letters around, magically it showed up as
your microphone went out.
Method to explain and repeatable.
Your mic went out.
Oh, is it?
Now it's okay now.
Okay.
Now it's not. Now it went out again.
Every letter, there's a story with every letter. It's absolutely connected to how the band became successful. Tenacity, wisdom, inspiration, stability, trust, excellence, and discipline. All those factors factored into how the band became a successful band. And I always say we were turned down more times than a bed sheet, and we've come back more times than Freddy Krueger. Both Steve and I are in the entertainment business, and we know what reinvention's about. Nobody knows reinvention more than people in the entertainment business because we live in a what have you done for me lately world. However, reinvention is not new to the entertainment industry. Think about reinvention in your life. You reinvent yourself every year. You go to school for the first day of school, you got new clothes on and you're going, this year I'm going to be a different person, and you reinvent yourself for that year. Then you get into college, you reinvent yourself in college. You get out of college and you look for a job and you reinvent yourself in the job. You reinvent yourself when you're finding a mate. You reinvent yourself when you have a kid. Then something happens and maybe the marriage doesn't work out and maybe the job doesn't work out, and you're always reinventing. So what is the process by which we can look at some fundamental truths about the ability to reinvent that can be put in a cogent business framework that can make it work? And that's what is so satisfying about the book and about the Twisted Method of Reinvention, which weaves together the story of my life and the story of Twisted, because rock and roll is a sexy story. Let's face it, rock and roll is sexy. If you can do it in the context of rock and roll, you're going to pay more attention to it. So that's what makes the book, I think, so absolutely compelling.
So, what I think we should do is, now that the light in your hotel room is making you look mysterious and wise, let's take a couple of questions. So I want to go back.
I'm not in the witness protection program. This hotel has got some of the worst lighting I've ever seen in my life. I love this hotel. It's just that the lighting in the room isn't great.
But you're okay. We can see you.
You can? Okay.
Yeah. We're right. You've got that mysterious look to you. So these questions are good. So I'm going to go back to Seth, who I kind of set up before, leadership coach and SMF. So here's what he said. Twisted Sister clearly had a shared purpose and stuck to it. How do you help a business team develop that kind of shared purpose when you don't have the luxury of firing drummers until you get the right one.
Do you want to take that, or should I take that?
Yeah, I think let's we could both take it, but you go first.
Well, there's two kinds of ways a band can move forward, and one way is a partnership in which everybody sinks and swims, and the other way is like a solo artist. For example, you have Bruce Springsteen in the E Street Band, or Tom Petty in the Heartbreakers, or Elvis Costello in the Attractions. When you have those kinds of bands, it is implied just by the name of the band that there's somebody who's the head of it, and then there's side people. And when you're doing that, you're basically telling the side people, you're never going to be as famous as me. You're never going to be as rich as me. So I'm going to make sure that you guys get paid all the time. I will take the risk up front and make sure that you as a company are taken care of. That's how that happens. When you have a band of partners like I do in Twisted, and everybody sinks and swims, what you have is the loyalty of those people, because everybody's going for a shared goal. So the first thing you have to do is ask yourself, what kind of company do I have?
Right.
And once you've established the kind of company that you have, is it going to be, I'm the head and you're just working for me, or X amount of you are part of the management package that will benefit should things explode? Then you have a different way of how to handle situations. So I think the first thing you have to do is establish the hierarchy of how you're going to run your business.
Yeah. So what you guys did, your business model, it was based on true equity among the band members. So you took all of your revenues were split up equally, and still are to this day. So even though you were you played an additional role as manager, et cetera, in addition to being the guitar player and a band member, you all got paid the same way, right?
Well, D wrote the songs and is paid as the writer. I'm the manager and get paid as producer. But as the other members are concerned, we all split the revenue evenly, which does not happen in a band where you're hiring side people.
Right.
So when we're going out on tour, for example, all the revenue that comes in on the tour, I may be the manager, but that's all split amongst us. When we have these songs that are used in commercials, et cetera, that all gets split between us. D is the writer and does get paid for that. And some bands, by the way, split that up evenly, and some bands don't. In our particular case, D's writing share went to him. However, the cumulative amount of money that were all brought in for touring, et cetera, is always split in a partnership way.
So there's a feeling among the band that we're all in this together, that
absolutely,
that none of us is working for anybody else.
Right.
So in a business context, I mean, that literal model may or may not work, but on a team, if you can generate the kind of environment where people, and this is also true about Twisted, there's a commonality of purpose and a commonality of goal. We're all working towards the same thing. And everybody is very clear on their role in getting us there, right? So Mendoza's the bass player. He's not going to get up and try to take D's spot, et cetera, right? So in a team, there's this old ridiculous saying, there is no I in team. We've all heard that one, which makes me gag. It's like, well, there's a lot of letters that aren't in team. There's no Z in team either. But the fact is that a team is made up of I's, of great individual talent, but we're working together to accomplish something that's going to benefit all of us. And I think that dynamic is true in a company. It's true in a band. It's true in any construct where human beings are coming together to accomplish something. And a leader's job is to know people, in part, is to know people on the team well enough to know what their talents are, what their core values are, and bring them together around those shared values, and to be really clear on what it is that we're all working towards. And when people buy into that proverbial vision and see how they can help get us there, that's a wait for it, a team that rocks. Oh, that was pretty sappy, but it's true.
So the S in Twisted stands for stability.
Yeah.
And I realized early on that creating a stable business environment, a business environment in which everybody was making money, was going to allow the band to fulfill its goals. I lead with a quote from Duke Ellington. When I read the quote, I almost fell off my chair because I could not believe the quote. He said, "You want to keep a bunch of musicians together, you need a gimmick. My gimmick was to pay them." And I thought, what a genius statement. And it's so simple. But the fact is that early on, I said to the guys in the band, how much do you all need? How much do we all need to not have to worry about anything else but play in this band? Not have to have another job or anything else. How much do you need? You know, we got girlfriends, we have apartments. How much? We set up a base amount of money that we needed. And then the object was earn enough money to make sure the stability of the organization was always there. And we were always able to earn enough money. And not only were we able to create a stable environment where everybody could count on this money, but we made so much money that not only did we get comfortable with being able to sustain ourselves, but we were able to reinvest in the company. And everybody agreed that all the money goes back into the company to get a bigger PA, better lights, to get a better studio, to do more demos, to get more rehearsal time. This was a shared goal put together because the stability of the band was maintained because of a vision of stability. And I can't underline this more. Companies are like airplanes. And the whole point of an airplane is you want to kind of like sail through the sky, but you know, you get turbulence. And that turbulence manifests itself in all different ways. You know, there's challenge turbulence, there's crisis turbulence, and there's catastrophic turbulence. How you react to that turbulence, how you react to the crisis, how you react to the challenge, to always bring the company back to stability is the key to a successful company thriving.
Yeah, beautiful. So I'm going to throw another question to you. This is from Brenda. It's more of a music industry question. She says, like Mark Volman of the Turtles, have you considered becoming a full-time teacher in business/music to teach students things you learned the hard way from your years of touring and managing?
You know, anything can happen. I haven't been offered a position. I've spoken to enough people who tell me that the people they have to listen to in college don't know 1/8 of what I know. And you know how that works. At some point, maybe somebody will recognize it and say, you know, how about you doing this? Because when I go listen to people teach business courses, I fall off my chair because they're so stupid and they have no bearing on the reality of what I went through. And what I believe I went through is what everybody tends to go through, and it's the rubber meets the road. You know, these are real issues that come up, and how do you handle these real issues? So yeah, that could happen someday. And thank you for suggesting that. Hopefully my monosyllabic presentation will be adopted by a university someday.
Yeah, but there's all kinds of ways to teach, right? I mean, you're doing your keynote speeches.
Well, I do keynote speeches. I'm also mentoring musicians. You met one last night.
Right. Yeah.
You
actually met her before. I actually interviewed her when we were working on the book.
That's true. So Melissa is an artist. I mentor several artists because for no money, just because I love them. And when you mentor as opposed to manage, you don't have to pick up the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, because you don't have to. I love mentoring, but yeah, I mean, the book is important. My podcast is important, which is the JJ French Connection on Spotify and Apple Tunes. And podcast one is the JJ French Connection, JAY Connection, the JJ French Connection. And, you know, motivational speaking, corporate gigs. It all coalesces in a teaching mode.
Yeah, exactly.
Ultimately.
And you have done a couple of guest appearances at university settings as well.
Yeah, and
there's anything can happen. So who do you? I'll take one more music question. This is an interesting one from Brad. He asked, what bands that formed after the year 2000 do you see lasting for 30 plus years like you guys did? Bands that started within the last 20 years.
Yeah, I don't know. When did Tame Impala probably? I think they're a great band. I don't know what year Tame Impala started. I think they're phenomenal. So I really like them. My Morning Jacket may have started after 2000. I'm not really sure about that. I don't really want to go down that road of, you know, when I was a boy, these bands are great. Everything sucks after a certain year. Because then I start sounding like my dad, who said that everything sucked after 1946. Like my father had a real simple answer about everything. You know, he was like, you know, he thought the Beatles sucked. He thought everything sucked. He goes, you know, after 1946, it was all baby, baby, baby. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He really kind of lumped it all together and like disposed of it in 2 seconds. Like, don't bother me. And I could do that too. I mean, I could easily go, you know, when I was a kid, we had all these bands. Fact is, when I want to listen to music, recreationally, I don't need to. I listen to blues because blues is my classical music. Blues is timeless. Blues makes me happy. And those guys are long gone. You know, whether they're Muddy Waters, Sonny Boy Williamson, Lightning Hopkins, Willie Dixon, you know, the list just goes, you know, Memphis Slim, Sunnyland Slim, Lonnie Johnson, Big Mama Thornton. I can listen to that all day long. That is my classical music. That's what truly makes me happy. I also am a Beatleologist. I know far too much about the band than I really need to know, much of the chagrin of my wife. I write a Beatle column for Goldmine magazine. They are a gold standard for me. But if you're going to ask me, do I listen to the Beatles, Stones, Who's Up, Floyd, Queen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? You know, yes, to a degree. What most of you need to understand is the 9,000 performances I made plus the other 2,000 shows that I saw kind of get to a point where it's like your hard drive gets totally jammed up and all too much. I will say this to you people, if you really want to see something amazing and you don't know or you've never seen it, trust me on this little piece of advice. Just trust me what I'm about to say to you. You all have a computer. You can all go onto YouTube and write this down. Write what I'm about to tell you down. There's a performance by James Brown on YouTube. It is a very famous performance by James Brown. This is the performance that the Rolling Stones, when asked what was the biggest mistake they ever made as a band, they said, following James Brown on the Tammy Show. You don't need to know what the Tammy Show stands for, even though it stands for Teenage Music International. It doesn't matter. It's just TAMI. You just write this down. James Brown, Tammy Show. And then there's two songs, Please, Please, and Night Train. You watch those two songs from James Brown, recorded at Santa Monica Auditorium in December of 1964 on a rock bill, on a bill that included Chuck Berry, Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas, Jerry and the Pacemakers, Leslie Gore, Smokey Robinson, the Supremes, the Beach Boys, James Brown, and the Rolling Stones all played in one afternoon. And watch James Brown's performance. It is the Ne Plus Ultra. After you see it, there's no reason to see anything else in your life. You can just retire because it is the single sickest performance by a musician. So when people ask me, you know, what's the best thing? You know, I saw Jimi Hendrix, let's have all that. Watch James Brown on the Tammy Show. If you're a performer, you got to do it. It will blow your mind.
It was so extraordinary that I found myself laughing through the whole thing. It's so mind-blowing that my response was just laughter, joyful laughter.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything.
Yeah, and the kids, 3,000 kids are losing their mind. There's nobody prompting them. You know, no one has to go give it up for James Brown because they were in riot mode, and these were black and white kids. And this is the single greatest performance. So screw everything you've ever seen before.
Yeah, but I want to come back to that question for a second because there's an aspect to it that I think really bears emphasis. The question was, can you think of any bands that you think will last for 20 years? Which implies that you guys, back in the days where you first made it, thought that you would last for 40 years. But that was not the case.
No,
you thought you would last for how long?
5 years. That's
5
it.
years.
10 at the outset. The fact that we're all here in 2021, the Kiss is still out there, AC/DC's out there, the Rolling Stones. I mean, my God, you know, like the fact that they're out there is an astonishing testament to the long history of these bands and the quality of the music that they produce. Or the fact that we consider Jimi Hendrix to still be the greatest guitar player after he's been dead for, you know, over 50 years is still astonishing. The 60s and the early 70s created some of the greatest rock artists. In fact, if you look at the Mount Rushmore of rock, which I always say is the Beatles, Stones, Who's Up, Floyd, Queen, AC/DC, Black Sabbath, that doesn't mean that Metallica, the Beach Boys, all these bands aren't great. Yes, they are. Just that the British bands tend to have an edge. Where America has the edge is in individuals. You know, we have James Brown, we have Springsteen, we have Johnny Cash, we have Bob Dylan. You know, only small talents. You know, these are monster people. There's so much great music out there, and that music, that legacy of that great music continues on. I just don't know what bands after 2000 we're going to be talking about in 2050.
Right. So, you know, my filter is when I hear a question like that, I'm always asking, and this is one of the reasons we collaborated on the book, I'm always asking, so what? So what's the lesson for the rest of us? And here's what I get from this. I'd love to hear your take on it. You guys thought maybe you'd last for 5 years, maybe 10 years, but you still, you were still working at a pace that would ultimately be 9,000 shows. In other words, you weren't playing. You weren't approaching this as if you were only going to last for 5 years. So the lesson for all of us, I think, is whatever it is that we're engaged in our business and our any aspect of our life, we don't know. Nobody has a crystal ball. We don't know how long we're going to endure or what our legacy is going to be. But the lesson is to act in a way and focus on that excellence in such a way that it is worthy of something lasting for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And then let the chips fall where they may.
Well, the discipline, the excellence driven by the discipline that we had meant that we were never going to accept being less than the best we could be on any given night. So as long as Twisted Sister existed, we were going to be great. How long it existed was a matter of fate in a way, because, you can also plan everything in the world. What does Mike Tyson say? You can have the greatest fight plan in the world, which is knocked out. Once you get hit in the face, it all goes out the window. What you do is you just strive to be excellent. When you watch a gold medal ice skater, you realize they became a gold medal ice skater because they dedicated themselves to ice skating, and they're up at 4 o'clock in the morning and doing it for 8 hours. It's something that you and I are not going to do, but they're going to do it. And that's why they're a gold medalist. And when you go to a philharmonic and you look at the first chair violinist and you go, how does that first chair violinist become a first chair violinist? Because they're up at 4 a.m. and they're playing 12 hours a day, and that's what they're doing. And they've dedicated their lives to it, and on and on and on and on and on. And if you want excellence, you have to just pursue it. You have to pursue it blindly. And that's what we did. We pursued the excellence blindly, never knowing when it was going to stop. And the book will detail, it came to a screeching halt. It came to a screeching halt because, as we detail in the book, and there's 4 basic stages in the band's career. There's the bar days that lasted from 73 to 82. Then there was the MTV era days, which included all the hit records from 83 to 88. Then there was the dark period where Dee and I filed for bankruptcy. We lost everything, and we thought it was all over. And I started working overnights at a pool hall and selling stereos. And Dee was, working for Suzette and helping his wife, helping her do makeup because they had no money. We lost everything. And then there was the festival years, and we reformed because of 9/11, because we did a benefit to raise money for the New York City Widows and Orphans Fund, because even though we hated each other's guts, 9/11 transformed everybody's life to the point where everybody knew somebody who died, especially if you're from New York, and we're all from New York. We're all born in New York City. And this 9/11 actually, as we all know, you can't overstate it enough. It changed the world. We reunited for a good reason, and then we did not know how much the world wanted us. We found out shortly thereafter that the world was craving Twisted Sister, which was wonderful. And we spent the next 14 years headlining the biggest shows in the world. And our drummer died in 2015. The band retired in 2016. And the band continues this day as a company that licenses its music because we're one of the most licensed bands in the world. However, that journey sounds beautiful as I relate it to you in the context of the story. It's wonderful to lay it out there. It sounds so magical. But I will tell you that there was so much pain and tragedy along the way that it's incredible that the band was able to pull itself together. And I give my guys the credit. I give Dee and Eddie and AJ, who passed away, and Mark. They're extraordinary people. We did things together that most people don't do because we dedicated ourselves blindly to the belief that we were one of the greatest live acts in the world. And you know what? When you play in front of 100,000 people, you have to say to yourself, how many artists are there in the world that a promoter will trust with 100,000 fans? And the answer is not many. Mm-hmm. Maybe 25 or 30. That's it. We're one of those 25 or 30 where a promoter can go, here's 100,000 people, close the show. Because if you suck, the whole festival goes down. If you suck, you let all those people down. Yeah. And the excellence of the band, because of the repetition, because of our demands upon each other to be great, inoculates us against failure.
Yeah, so I that's wonderfully said. And I want to start bringing us in for a landing here, but as evidence to the hard work that you guys put in. As you mentioned earlier, we actually put in the book a listing of all 9,000 shows. It goes on page after page. So,
and by the way, to put it in perspective so people understand it, especially in the early days, there are multiple shows per day. That's how you have to add it up.
Yeah, and they'll see it. What?
Yeah, in the first 3 years, for example, we did about 4,500 shows because we were doing 5 shows a night, 6 nights a week.
Yeah, yeah. So what I thought I would do is end this evening by reading all of these. No, I'm kidding. What I be like an Andy Kaufman. What I do want to end us with is just a couple of paragraphs towards the end of the book that I think wraps up our conversation this evening really nicely. So here are the words to bringing us in for a landing this evening. I have lived a crazy life as a hippie, drug dealer, high school revolutionary musician, band leader, band manager, producer, stereo salesman, father, and survivor of 2 heart procedures and prostate cancer. Although Sharon will say, in the heart of it, you do love each other, the band members, I will say there was an amazing amount of energy that went into becoming successful. I will say that we were audacious enough to believe that we could be one of the biggest bands in the world, and we became one of the biggest bands in the world. The proof is that we've sold millions of records. I have 37 gold and platinum albums on my wall as a guitarist, producer, executive producer, and manager. People always ask me, what's the crowning glory of Twisted Sister? Is it the success of our music? Is it the experience of having played in front of hundreds of thousands of people? Well, that was all great, of course, but our crowning glory, the end all and be all of our existence, the undeniable proof of our remarkable legacy happened in 1988 when the legendary fashion maven Mr. Blackwell named us on his list of the top 10 worst dressed women. I guess that says it all. Oh, man.
Yeah. Hey, Ma. Love you.
Thank you all for joining us this evening. Dan, do you want to come on back and bring us in for a landing or what?
Yeah, thank you both so much. That was a great conversation. And just to let everybody know, if you joined us late, after we end this broadcast, it's going to save and it's going to live in the archive. So if you missed the beginning, check it out. It takes about a minute to save, and then the entire broadcast you can watch again. Please tell your friends so that they can watch it as well. And once again, just one last time, we have signed copies of Twisted Business available at Book Soup. Thank you both for a great conversation. Thank you for your time. And we hope to see you in person again very soon. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Take care.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for hosting this for us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a great night, everyone.
Bye-bye.